Eric, there is a great deal of fascination with Tasmania from mainland Conservatives. It is, after all, the last state government that has, it's a blue dot in this endless sea of red that we've got going on. The victory is not a majority. They will have to govern with the blessing of Jackie Lambie's party. Indeed, one of the more humorous headlines this morning read, quote, "The Jackie Lambie experience triumphs with absolutely no policies." That might be a bit cruel. Others more kindly put it as a protest vote that has resulted with a dissatisfaction with the major parties. Now, are there a few lessons that mainland Liberals could learn, perhaps, either through minor parties, or that this might be the last chance for the Liberals to reform themselves and come back into a majority winning position?
Very interesting election result in Tasmania. We came from an historic high electoral success last time round. That said, we did shed about 12% of the vote, so that is a huge swing. Interestingly enough, the Labor parties picked up about 1% of that and the Greens about the same amount. So what happened was that people who wanted to kick the government and send it a message were not satisfied that Labor and the Greens were an appropriate alternative, and into that void stepped the Jackie Lambie network, who were the beneficiaries of that protest vote. So I think it is appropriate that it appears as though the Jackie Lambie network will join with the Liberals on the floor to allow minority government. Minority government is always difficult, and Premier Rockcliffe and others who are in the leadership team will need to cobble that together, but I have every confidence that they will. One of the interesting features of this election is that, and whilst the Liberal Party is a broad church, and I don't want to cast aspersions here, there, or indeed anywhere, it's interesting that the members of Parliament and candidates that media and other people like to denigrate because they were of a more conservative ilk, topped the poll in Bass, Lyons, Franklin and Clark. The Premier clearly topped the poll for his electorate of Braddon. But, interestingly, Prime Minister Albanese came down to Tasmania for the campaign launch and took great delight in denigrating me personally, and I've already thanked him for the notoriety and publicity that he gave me, publicity that money just couldn't buy. And what was the response of the electorate? It was a bit like Hillary Clinton's deplorable comments about Trump supporters.
Exactly.
Guess what? The electorate determined that if they were voting Liberal, Eric Abetz would come out on top. And might I add, the person that's close behind second is a former Liberal minister who has recontested the seat, and she is cast or knitted from a similar fabric as myself. So a strong message there that you cannot desert that base that the Liberal Party relies upon. That said, of course, if you want to govern, you've got to have policies that are attractive to a broad section of the community. But some of the personal denigration and misrepresentations that have occurred in the past have now been blown out of the water. And I think that allows for a new start for the Liberal Party in Tasmania and for the government. And I have every expectation that the Premier has read the message in the electorate's result.
Well, here's an idea for the next time round, when if you want to win a majority government, just get the Albanese's face on a poster next to yours with a quote about how much he dislikes you, and then you'll return in a majority government, because that seems to be the best way to go about it these days. Albanese's opinion polls are just diving. I mean, anyway.
Look, what you say is a very interesting analysis, and the lack of self-awareness that a Prime Minister should come into a state like Tasmania and then use his speech to denigrate one of the Liberal candidates shows how desperate the party was, but also how the Prime Minister does not have a self-awareness as to the responsibility and the way that a Prime Minister should hold himself and present himself to the to the electorate at large, but to engage in that sort of a behaviour, I just thought was demeaning of the office of Prime Minister. There was another Labor candidate who, might I add, was successful in being re-elected, but she told everybody that there was no room in the Tasmanian Parliament for people like me. Well, bad luck. It appears as though might be.
I love that the internet hates. I love that the left-wing internet hates that you've been re-elected. It's actually really upsetting them. Dave, look, the biggest criticism that's been levelled at Rebecca White was that she refused to do deals with the Greens. And this is actually a really interesting part of the Tasmanian election because, you know, as we know, across the whole country, Labor and the Greens are in bed with each other. They've got a meaningful, ongoing relationship there. Dare we say it, a monogamous relationship going on. Now, what's different about Tasmania? Because overall, it's quite a green state. Even the Liberal Party, with apologies to Eric, has been discussed as being further to the left than its siblings in Victoria. Now, why is this environmentally conscious state divided on the left? Do you have any thoughts about what's been going on down there that Labor is so, oh, I don't want to get near the Greens?
It's a very interesting move because, yeah, you're right. Across the nation, Labor Greens walk in lockstep and tandem coalition with each other to support each other to government. It's an interesting phenomenon because on the other side of the centre, the Liberal Party is a bit like this former Tasmanian Labor leader, unwilling to do deals with the minor party to the right of it, One Nation. But for the Labor Party to say they're not going to do deals with the Greens in Tasmania is an interesting decision in itself because it's almost a little bit of a character test that they're not willing to do absolutely anything to get government in Tasmania. So I'd actually offer a little bit of kudos to the former Labor leader for willing to put her principles again ahead of her career. And it just goes to show how extreme and far left of even Labor the Greens are, that a Labor leader would rather stay in opposition than do a deal with the Greens.
Well, Dave, it's also a bit strange because the Greens prop up the Labor vote. So we saw here that without the Greens, Labor really didn't stand a chance of winning the election. So that could be a sign for other states. I mean, I don't think they'll do it again. I believe the next time Tasmania goes around, Labor will take the Greens in a coalition to win. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's inevitable that the Labor will lean back into old habits down there? And, you know, the Conservatives better watch out next time if that's the case.
Well, Greens voters are never people who've left voting for the Liberal Party or One Nation or Australian Christians to then go and vote for the Greens. They're always the Labor voters who have just found somebody far left enough for themselves. And so it actually reflects a lack of ability on the part of the Labor Party to accurately and effectively lead the thoughts and philosophies of their own party to prosecute good arguments. They've been captivated rather by the arguments of the Greens, going into radical theories about gender and political correctness and all kinds of false victim-oppressor dichotomies in society to solve and create problems which aren't really there at all in the first place. And so they're victims of their own extremism in trying to get further and further away from the Liberal Party. Now, that is a rod for its own back, and hopefully we get to the end of this pendulum swing of going further and further to the left, shifting the Overton window into the realms of the ridiculous, and we actually start to come back to a common sense centre where people in the centre right have been holding common sense for a long time and instead have been increasingly demonised, when it's these people who are creating victim classes that don't exist and in actual reality piling hurt and injury and oppression on top of people by denying reality and affirming all kinds of confusions as if they're real. These are the people who are hurting Australia, and it's about time that the Greens and the extreme Labor voters who vote for them were actually jolted into reality and that they actually get some proper thought leadership saying, guys, 1 + 1 doesn't equal zebra. We actually have to have a sensible, coherent conversation about the facts, because this is becoming ridiculous. And how long can common sense people work in partnership with the extreme green?